Okay, great. All right. I would like to introduce tonight Leon Ruttley, who is with he's the volunteer and education manager for Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation. And come here, Leon, he's right here. And he's going to be doing a very, very interesting presentation for us tonight. You've been doing this for about 6 years?
Yes.
Okay. You have a degree in biology from the University, is that Southern Alabama or South?
South Alabama.
South Alabama. Okay. I found out I knew about this organization because I'm a master naturalist, and it was one of the places we can volunteer. And the people that volunteer there just love it. So I had a problem that there's something that I don't know what it is that's up in my attic. So I called to see what to do about it. I was so impressed with this organization because everybody was so helpful and they were so efficient. I mean, they call you right back. They tell you what to do, and it's very kind to the animals. And so I thought, some other people in the Sierra Club might also want this information. So I called them back and they said, yes, we would be happy to do a program. So we have Leon tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for inviting me to come speak to you. So we will cover actually quite a few hotline topics tonight. So my goal here today is to talk to you all a little bit about urban animals, dispel some myths that you may still be holding on to, and kind of prepare you all for the spring season here. We're going to see millions of baby animals being born in San Antonio, so y'all can help us with that. And I also want to talk about how you can volunteer with us. But we'll get started to talk about the history of WRR and the founding story. So I just wanted to switch all over here. So we'll start with a short video. I just want to give you all an idea of what the sanctuary is like, and to show you all a quick video. Yep. Okay. So the sanctuary is kind of hard to describe. It's a really big place. So I just want to show you this brief video. It shows a little bit about the sanctuary and a little bit about Lynn and her mission.
I'm Lynn Cuny, founder and president of Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Incorporated. We're here in Kendalia, Texas. Wildlife Rescue was founded in 1977. The organization had humble beginnings.
She just wants the
Sure.
yeah.
Perfect.
And then you can turn it off, right? Yeah, afterwards. Okay. Sorry.
You're good. There we go.
I'm Lynn Cuny, founder and president of Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation Incorporated. We're here in Kendalia, Texas. Wildlife Rescue was founded in 1977. The organization had humble beginnings in my backyard, but the plan from day one was always to have what we now have, a 200-acre sanctuary. And actually, our sanctuary is 212 acres. We also have a rehabilitation clinic in San Antonio, Texas. That is where most of the animals come prior to coming up here to the sanctuary. The mission of Wildlife Rescue is to rescue, rehabilitate, and release native species of birds, mammals, and reptiles. We do that 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. In addition, we have non-native species who we have rescued. They cannot go back to the wild because this is not their native land. Those animals come here to Wildlife Rescue from abusive situations. Once they're here at the sanctuary, that's behind them. Another aspect of our mission is the do no harm form. And here at the sanctuary, we do rescue cows and chickens and goats and sheep and pigs and donkeys and mules and ducks and geese. Those are animals who usually are either slaughtered, we get them from abusive situations, situations of neglect. We have a fully staffed rehabilitation hospital here at Wildlife Rescue, a full-time veterinarian, a full-time vet tech. We also have vet tech interns who are learning how to care medically for wild animals. And there's constantly animal care going on there. The feeding of puppies who have been orphaned, whose mothers have been killed or trapped and removed, the care of animals who have been injured. All of that happens right here at the sanctuary. The animals then go from the hospital into areas here at the sanctuary where they can continue their rehabilitation process before being set free. Think for just a minute how vital it is that every animal on this planet, every animal in this community has an advocate. You can be that advocate. You can educate yourself about the plight of these animals, about what they're going through, about what's being done to them. And by doing that, you can start to speak out for them. You can make a difference. You can make a difference like Wildlife Rescue has been making a difference since 1977. You can also help us to continue doing what we do every day. It is vital that our life-saving work here at Wildlife Rescue continues. Please do what you can, support us and all these animals. Thank you.
Great. So just to kind of give you all an idea of how big the sanctuary is, that drone footage does a pretty good job of showing you just the scope of everything out there. So Wildlife Rescue started in 1977 in Lynn's backyard. Like most wildlife rehab is still done to this day. We are really the exception to the rule in that we have this big facility. We're always there. A lot of wildlife rehab, depending on what state you're in, you get a permit from your state, and that allows you to keep squirrels and birds and possums, and you're able to rehab those in your home. So that's how Lynn started, and largely how wildlife rehab is done today. So our mission's pretty straightforward. It's really threefold: to rescue, rehabilitate, and release native wildlife. That's 10,000 animals a year. Sometimes we take in 100 animals a day in the summer. So it gets really busy, and that it takes a village to do that. We have our volunteers play a big part in that. We have full-time caretaker staff. Of course, the veterinarian and her team play a big part in the rehab setting as well. And then we also take in interns yearly as well. The second part, of course, is to provide sanctuary and individualized care. WRR is closed to the public, so you can't just come out to the sanctuary if you're a tourist. It is truly that, a sanctuary for the animals. A lot of the animals that live at the sanctuary have had a pretty rough life before they come to us. A lot of the primates come from research laboratories. And to be honest with you, a lot of the animals don't want to be around people anymore, and that's totally fine. A lot of the enclosures in the sanctuary are designed for them to be able to hide and really feel comfortable and not be, constantly observed. The final thing that we do, and there's about 600 permanent residents at the sanctuary. We go through about 2 pickup trucks worth of food every single day. And I'll come back to that here in a minute. And the last thing we do, of course, is advocacy, to be a voice for animals in need. I do these kinds of talks for anyone who invites me out, whether it's an HOA or, an organization like yours. We also operate a 24-hour hotline that you can call at any time. And if it's late at night, we'll call you back, first thing in the morning, but we will return all calls. And that's how a lot of our education is done, just one-on-one with people with their specific needs in mind. So I need to update this, but our location here in San Antonio is 166 Babcock Road. So we moved from Bassey to Babcock just in an effort to downsize and be a little more efficient with our funding. Yeah, so talk briefly about the wildlife that we take in and that are released. So last year we took in, I think it was 10,600 animals. And the year before we actually broke 11,000. So it's been pretty busy. And I think, with the way that San Antonio is growing and the way the winters have been pretty mild, I think we'll continue to see an increase in that number every year. And the more people that know about us, so hopefully you will be bringing us the baby possums and your injured hawks and owls. So the more people know about WRR, of course, the more animals will end up taking in. So we do take in animals from all over, not just San Antonio. So from Austin or New Braunfels, Floresville, we actually take in animals from across the country, especially when it's animals that are in need of sanctuary too. So here's our hotline number. It's on all of our literature too. So, keep that number on speed dial, get your little brochure and keep it on your refrigerator. That way you know who to call if you find an injured wild animal. Yeah. Yeah, I really like this quote. It's not enough to understand the natural world. The point is to defend and preserve it. And I know the Sierra Club's mission is a big part of what y'all are doing here. So very much in line with what we're trying to do as well. So we'll talk a little bit about urban animals. So I get this a lot. People often think that all wildlife lives, deep in the woods somewhere. When in reality, you can look up, in the city and see wild birds flying overhead almost any given time, as well as a lot of wild nocturnal mammals tend to be the big ones that we see in the city. And to be honest with you, some of these species do better in the urban environment than they would out in a rural setting. Animals like raccoons and possums who love cat food obviously have an abundance of that here in the city. So there's also just a lot of resources. There's a lot more water to be found in the city, people's swimming pools and bird baths and, all that kind of stuff supports a lot of wildlife. And that's not even including the people who like to feed the wildlife, whether you're feeding the deer or the birds or, whoever you're feeding. So, yeah, and so all these animals have adapted to the urban environment. There's definitely more raccoons per square mile in the city than there is out in the country. You got to think our trash is their resources. So every, fast food dumpster is going to support a family of raccoons, right? So there's more of these guys here in the city than out in the country. And one thing that I always encourage people to do, like this is a pretty daunting thing, right? To save the world and to help all the wildlife that you can. And it can be, where do you start? And one simple thing that you can do, of course, is just helping with litter control. And, and picking up simple trash can go a long way. I've done multiple rescues here in San Antonio where animals get ensnared in disposable food trash items. The one that comes to mind the most are those little dome-shaped lids you get when you get a slushie. I've seen animals stuck in those, mayonnaise jars, the classic Coke bottle ring, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's not on purpose. Sometimes our trash bags rip or truck going down the road, something flies out the back. So my philosophy is like, if you can't recycle it, make sure it makes it to the landfill the best, at least while it's in your control. So yeah. Another little thing I like to touch on here too is sometimes we, maybe you're having a banana or an apple going down the road and you're finished with that and you just toss it out the window. You think, oh, it's fine, biodegradable, no issues here, right? Well, oftentimes if we discard food items near the roadsides, that attracts rodents. And then all the other animals that eat rodents are going to now be in danger. We get in a lot of hawks and a lot of vultures that get hit by cars on the sides of roads. So, next time you finish that banana peel, just throw it in the floorboard and, dispose of it when you get home. And you may save a hawk like that, kind of roundabout way. So, yeah, animals getting trapped in the environment here as well. We see a lot of animals getting stuck in the storm drain systems here. I have a network of volunteers that we call rescue volunteers, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end. And these guys and gals will go, jump into a water retention pond at an HEB and get a baby duckling out of there. Or, maybe it's a skunk who fell into a storm drain. We respond to these quite frequently. Stuck in trash cans and dumpsters is a very common thing as well. Yeah. Oftentimes when we have new construction, we have a lot of wildlife conflicts as well, whether that's in rural settings. We put in septic tanks here in Texas, seems like a common thing to do. And a lot of times when people are plumbing their homes, they'll cut that PVC pipe and leave little pieces of PVC around on construction sites. And I have personally gone out and rescued several deer and other animals who've had PVC pipes stuck on their feet. And then construction netting is a big one. A lot of these construction sites are trying to do erosion control. So they put up netting and it's like the perfect thing to ensnare deer. I see a lot of bucks with that kind of stuff stuck on them. So, and it can be hard to kind of control those construction sites, but if that's something that you're witnessing, you know who to call now so we can help you with those problems. Talk a little bit about trapping and relocating. So this is a really common topic for our hotline. You can go out and buy these live animal traps from Tractor Supply and Home Depot. And, you don't have to have any credentials. They're pretty inexpensive. So these traps have really made their way into a lot of people's hands that probably shouldn't have them. Sometimes these traps, when people set them, they don't monitor them. And within hours of trapping an animal in the 110-degree San Antonio heat, they can, go into heat stroke and quickly expire after that. It's not uncommon for animals to injure themselves badly trying to get out of these cages as well. And really, this is not a solution to a wildlife problem. And I'll get into the details on that here right now. One of the big things that happens is that, of course, they become injured and dehydrated and emaciated in those traps. So obviously not a humane option to just start with. And then the second big thing is that people often trap raccoons when they're most active, and they're most active in the spring and summer when they're having babies. So if someone sets a trap for a mama raccoon, they'll catch the mama raccoon, but of course the babies are not interested in what's in the trap. All they know is mom's milk, and they're not going to go into a trap. So you'll have ended up trapping mom, and you'll end up with orphaned baby raccoons, and then you're going to be calling us to take in those raccoons. So this is a classic scenario that we deal with year after year. So yeah, the reality is that if you trap a raccoon, a skunk, or possum, we're talking about little nocturnal mammals, and these little guys set up a territory, right? They have their resources. It's probably the cat food that you're leaving out on the back porch, or maybe it's your bird feeder. And if you remove them, it's just going to open up territory for other animals to move in. So you'll end up trapping everything forever. And I've taken phone calls like that before where, you know, I'm talking to someone that say, oh, I've been trapping raccoons for 30 years in San Antonio. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, if you've been doing this for 30 years, you know, maybe we try something a little bit different this time, right? So, and of course, these mammals have a pretty small home range. You know, removing them out of the urban setting is detrimental to them. There have been studies, you know, if you take an urban raccoon who's been eating, you know, Little Caesars pizza scraps and cat food and drinking out of your bird bath, and you go drop him down the Guadalupe River, he doesn't know how to catch scorpions or crickets or crawdads. You know, he's not equipped for that. The mother raccoon stays with her babies for up to a year. So it's like dropping you in a foreign country with no money and no contacts and, you know, expecting you to survive. So it's really not as humane as people might make it out to be. So, briefly on glue traps, I can't really say, this is really one of the worst things that we see with wildlife rescue. Most people have moved away from glue traps, but oftentimes people will call me and not know that these are in their home because they're contracted with pest control companies. And this may even be at your place of work. You know, you may have a company that that comes and does your pest control, and they may put these glue traps out. The trouble with glue traps is that they're very indiscriminate. This image here, you know, maybe you're trying to catch cockroaches, right? And you know, you catch a cockroach, but then here comes a little gecko who wants to eat that roach. Now he's stuck. And then you may have a snake that's trying to eat the gecko, and then a bird trying to eat the snake, and you'll end up catching animals all up the trophic food levels. So they're really inhumane because the animals suffer greatly. Oftentimes they die from suffocation when this has happened. And when we do get them, we often see a lot of damage to fur and feathers, both of which take a long time to regrow. So the rehab process is going to be way longer than other animals that come in with through other means. So no glue traps, please. And I've even started to take down the little fly papers that we put up because someone brought us a hummingbird who flew into one. So, you know, that's off the table now too. So, yeah, and these animals are native to Texas. You're trying to trap and remove animals that were here first, and it's really unrealistic to think that you're going to trap and remove all the animals in your backyard. You're just going to keep doing it over and over and over. So what I want to do tonight is give you all a couple tools and a couple things to add to your repertoire of how to manage your backyard and encourage wildlife while at the same time be able to repel wildlife that's unwanted. So the Humane Society publishes a really great guide every year, and I can definitely give y'all some resources about this in particular, but this guide covers a lot of the hotline topics that we talk about, and they have this great little center fold here, and it talks about all the little weak spots around your house. I'm going to give y'all a bunch of tips and tricks tonight, but there's no substitution for a physical barrier. If you have raccoons in your attic, you have to fix the hole that they're getting into. No amount of any of these other tips is going to solve that problem until you install a physical barrier, right? And this can be hard sometimes. Sometimes you don't know where they're getting in at. Maybe it's loose shingles or there's some loose flashing, and it can be hard to tell. And that's when you're going to want to hire a professional, a contractor to come inspect the home and make sure you don't have any weak spots. The basic ones that you should be aware of course, chimney caps. Probably don't have a lot of chimneys here in San Antonio, and even the ones that we do have, people often don't use them very frequently. So they make a good home for quite a number of species. Bats, chimney swifts, other mammals like raccoons and squirrels love the chimney. And you're supposed to have that chimney capped with like a heavy duty wire mesh for two reasons. One, to keep animals out, and two, if animals do nest in your chimney and then you go to use it, it's a pretty big fire hazard. So, something to really think about if you haven't thought about your chimney in years because it's so hot in San Antonio and winters are pretty mild. Some other interesting things here, real basic stuff is your trash. Just making sure that your trash is secured. That way there's not a constant resource for the animals to keep coming back. Another big one is animals digging under fences. I get this a lot. Classic call is, my dog keeps getting sprayed by skunks and, like, well, how are the skunks getting into the backyard? I said, well, there's holes, they can dig around. And the best thing that I found through my experience, and it says here, is to use what's called hardware cloth, which I'll talk about this quite a bit. And it's kind of like a heavy duty chicken wire. Yes.
So are they generally the ones like sometimes we think of with the black with the white stripe, or are they the smaller,
Skunks?
the little?
Yeah, so we just have the striped skunk here, and they can have different patterns for sure. There's kind of that classic pattern. It's kind of like a oval with the white streak on the tail. But I've seen them with kind of different color patterns over the years. We raise about 300 baby skunks every year, so you get to see a lot of them grow up over the time. So, but there are a couple different species of skunk, but I've only seen the one here in San Antonio. I've seen another species, but he actually came from far away. That's what I was thinking. So, yeah.
Did you say 300 skunks a year?
Yeah, babies that we will raise. And we take in quite a number of injured and sick adults. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so just some basic stuff to keep your home safe. Using this hardware cloth meshing, we build a lot of enclosures out of that, and it's raccoon proof. If you try and use chicken wire to secure stuff, it's just too flimsy. The raccoons are a lot stronger than you think they are, and they'll break through that chicken wire. So you want to go with what's called hardware cloth. It's not really cloth, it's more like a heavy duty wire, but you can find this at any hardware store. Yeah. Hardware cloth. Yeah. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So there's a brochure here, and this can be found on our website as well for those viewing from home. If you just look up wildlife rescue and rehabilitation, you'll find us on Google, and you can find this. And this tip or this little packet here goes over a lot of the tips I'm going to give you tonight. So you'll kind of have a quick reference guide in the future. Yeah, so, we've learned a lot over the years. Our hotline experts have really compiled a lot of information on what works and what doesn't. And we've learned a lot through trial and error. So a lot of the things I'm going to share with you tonight are things that we've just learned do work, So there you go. There's a lot of information out there on the internet. Some of it is a little iffy, right? This is stuff that we found that really works for us. So baby season is obviously pretty long here in Texas. If we're going to be doing anything with animal repellents, trying to secure the home, those kinds of things, we should be taking care of that in the fall or in the winter before spring hits. If you're starting to do some of these techniques in the middle of spring or the summer, it complicates matters because then we're worried about baby animals as well. So just kind of keep that in the background as we go through some of these. Yeah. So obviously securing trash, this is a basic one. Obviously if animals get stuck in trash cans, it's not the end of the world. Oftentimes you can just knock that trash can over and he'll leave under his own power and his own time. But sometimes people can't or won't knock over their trash cans. And we have certainly sent rescue volunteers out to do simple things just like that, believe it or not. But that's what we're here to do is help wildlife one way or the other. So that's a simple one. Tree trimming. So if we've got issues with animals in the attic or in the eaves of the house, you want to trim your trees back, jumping distance, squirrel jumping distance is about 10 feet. The reality is that we love our trees here in San Antonio, right? We use them a lot to keep our homes cool. So if we've got nice big oak trees around the house, we don't really want to trim those if we can help it. The other option for this is to wrap the trees in some kind of plastic or metal flashing so that the animals can't climb. So you can do that at the base of the tree or on limbs that are approaching your home as well. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of work, but if you're, going crazy because the squirrels are nesting in the attic and you can't sleep, then this is definitely going to be worth it, right? So, yes.
Like the recommendation, like from arborists, the minimum of 3 feet, maybe 5, but not usually 10.
Well, squirrels can jump pretty far. So, yeah, I mean,
I guess, but maybe not. Be far enough away they can't.
Yeah, and of course, that's a decision for the homeowner to make. how far they want to cut their trees. And, this is definitely something you want to be cautious about doing when it's warm outside because of things like oak wilt and that stuff as well. So, the arborists do recommend a little bit shorter though. Yeah.
But she raises that good point, because if it's above the roof.
Right. Well, then at
they
that
can't
point,
jump up 10 feet.
right.
They can jump down.
Yeah. So just basically trying to think like a squirrel and figure out how close raccoons are not great jumpers. I can tell you this from personal experience, but squirrels are phenomenal acrobats and they can get pretty far. So, yeah. Also, when trimming trees, we see a lot of nest destruction, especially when we're trimming like a lot of trees and it's like apartment complexes or businesses. And if you're involved in that process at all, try to encourage people to do this in the winter. It's not an uncommon call for us to say, oh, they're doing tree trimming and we found a nest of baby squirrels or we found a nest of baby birds. And we can guide people through that if that does happen. But if we can avoid that in the first place is ideal. Yes.
So that issue with, not that people should have a tree really close to the roof, okay. But the issue with them getting onto the roof, is that only for things like composite shingles? I mean, if you have a metal roof or a tile roof or all these other kinds of.
Sure.
Or what if you have a lot of solar panels on your roof, are they less likely to get on there and be able to navigate?
And it's different for every home. You could have a heavy duty metal roof and, have loose vents on the side of the home or, so it just really depends on the individual home. And, a lot of times when people call and they have issues like that, maybe they can't afford to repair the house or they don't know, the steps going about that. We'll guide people to some resources over using the hotline to tell people, you may try this service or, just different kinds of options for people because every home is different, right? So we talked about chimneys already. This is a big one. This oftentimes people are calling us and there's already animals in the chimney. Unfortunately, we don't have the skills or the proper tools to actually work in chimneys. So I always recommend that people call a chimney sweep. These guys, this is what they do for a living, and they often extract animals from chimneys, and they have specialized tools that can do that. So, yeah, if you are a DIYer and you want to try and help these animals out on your own, you can open the flue. I tell people close all the doors in the house. You can open the flue and then open the front and the back door. And if you've got birds in there, they typically want to go towards the light. So you turn all the lights off in the house, open the exits that you want them to fly to, and then you can open the flue and try and encourage them to leave that way if animals fall to the bottom. Yeah, Mama Raccoon has the ability to scruff her babies and take them off. So if this is raccoons in your chimney or your attic or under your deck or in your pool house or in your garage, we can do a bunch of things to get mom to do the work for us. So the first thing that we're going to do is loud noise. These small mammals, the raccoons, have a good sense of hearing, good sense of smell, right? So we're going to use that to our advantage. Typically, animals don't like the sound of human voices, right? So if you can get a little boombox or a little Bluetooth speaker that we all have now and set that in the area where we think mom is nesting, in the attic, under the deck, and just you want to play music, or my preferred thing is some kind of talk radio where there's a lot of human voices, or just the regular radio that has, these wild commercials of the guys yelling about used cars. And, if it's irritating for you, then it's going to be irritating for the animals as well. So this is a really good technique. And we've used this many, many times over and over, and it won't work on its own. I mean, it can, but I like to kind of hedge our bets and add a few things to this. So number one, we're going to go with some loud music, right? And you got to kind of think like this. If someone in your bedroom put on a radio and you couldn't figure out how to turn it off, you would go sleep somewhere else, right? And that's what's happening with the raccoons. She can't get any rest. They're nocturnal, and you want to do this during the daytime when she's sleeping and trying to rest, and you're off at work. You can have the radio going and start this repellent. The next big thing is bright lights. Most of our attics, I tell you what, I just want to move through this pretty quick, so I will take some questions at the end. So don't forget. But the best thing for our attics, typically we just have the one little anemic light bulb in the attic, right? Swap that out for a good LED bulb or a cheap clip-on shop light. You can get these kind of lights at Home Depot or Walmart. and set them up there. So same thing, if you're in your bedroom and you can't figure out how to turn the lights off, you're probably going to figure out another place to go. So now it's loud and it's bright. Outside the home, motion activated floodlights can go a long way at repelling quite a number of animals. It depends on the animal and the animals in your neighborhood, right? If you have raccoons and you keep the porch light on while they eat cat food, then they're probably not going to care too much about the floodlights, but it just kind of depends on exactly what's going on. But this is a pretty good technique. Preventing access in the first place, obviously, is what we want to do. This hardware cloth, here's an image here of that. So sealing these entry points, I often give the advice for people who can't afford to fix it the right way, to hire a contractor to come out and fix their home. Maybe they're on a fixed income or for whatever reason. You can get this hardware cloth for pretty cheap, and you buy big washers and big drywall screws. So the long, aggressive screws in a washer, you can put that washer over the cloth, over the meshing, and drive that screw in, and that's pretty tough. And that'll keep the animals from coming back in until you can fix it the right way, right? So this can be tough. You definitely want to make sure that you're not trapping animals in, right? So if you're really handy, you can put in a one-way door. You can actually buy these kinds of acrylic one-way doors on eBay. So, if you're handy or maybe your husband's handy and you can get them to do it, this is a good approach as well. So sealing off all the entry points except for one. Another approach that people use if an animal's living in something is to duct tape newspaper over that hole. And when she leaves, she'll punch out. And that way it gives you an indication whether or not she's been coming or going, or if she's left at all. Nowadays, a lot of us have little cameras all over the house. And those, of course, you just turn and point them right at where you think those animals coming and going from. And that can give you a really good idea of what's going on as well. But the newspaper method's kind of the old-fashioned way, but it still works. So we did sound and sight, and the last thing these animals are very sensitive to is scent, right? So all of these small animals react to the scent of ammonia. This is in large predator urine. Animals like bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, they all mark their territory with urine. And when these smaller mammals smell that, it just works on their instincts to kind of freak them out. It's not toxic, it's not poisonous, it's not going to hurt them, they're not going to drink it and die. They're just going to smell it, and this ammonia evaporates pretty quickly. So my preferred method is to take some old sponges that you retire from the sink, or old t-shirts, or even tennis balls work good if you want to roll them up under the house. Maybe you have a pier and beam house and there's someone living under there. The ammonia is pretty volatile, so it's going to vaporize and fill that space with ammonia, and it's just going to freak these little guys out. So same thing, if you're in your bedroom and it smells like ammonia, you're probably going to find a new place to go, right? So now we've got all these little tools that we can use in conjunction to make it smelly, bright, loud, and try and drive mom out. And mom will decide, no, this is really not the best den right now. And she'll scruff her babies one at a time and bring them to her backup den. You have to give her time. She can only do one at a time. So this isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to take, maybe a week. And raccoons pretty much always have a backup den. The insulation in your attic is her first choice, right? Super nice up there, feels perfect temperature, but she'll have a backup den in the empty lot, maybe under an old rotten tree, or maybe under the neighbor's tool shed. We just don't want her in our house, right? So, another good scent repellent is cayenne pepper. Obviously, you want to be careful with this one. I recommend going to like an ethnic grocery store, like a Mexican market or Asian market, and getting the real deal, or even an Indian market cayenne pepper, a little bit stronger than what you can find at HEB. And it'll be a little bit cheaper if you buy it in bulk like that. And there's a couple ways that you can use it. I try to spread it in her path, right? So say, the raccoon jumps the fence, she walks along the top fence rung, and then she climbs your gutters, and then into the attic she goes, right? So somewhere along that path, you can spread cayenne pepper, and she'll walk in it. And just like a cat, they're going to sit down and they're going to groom themselves, right? And it's not going to hurt her. It's going to ruin her day, right? Cayenne pepper, it's bad for a while, but then it goes away. But she's not going to want to keep going through that over and over. So this is a pretty effective repellent for small mammals. People often do put some in water and spray it on their plants to help with the deer. I mean, I haven't had any personal experience with that, but I assume that would work pretty good as long as it's not getting rinsed off, right? I know the deer, it's pretty tough. I think we've all kind of just resigned to not grow a whole lot or that's not fenced in, right? So, yeah. So a little bit more on protecting our lawns. Of course, if the deer are eating everything, you're gonna have to cage in your plants. We try really hard to grow some things at the sanctuary. The deer have learned they can knock those cages over. It's a losing battle, but we'll still try, right? Having pretty high fences. I've seen deer jump 6-foot fences and seen that happen in real life. So a regular privacy fence is probably not going to keep the deer out forever. And just simple things like if you move into a home here in San Antonio, a classic call we get is, oh, I'm new here to San Antonio. Why are the deer eating all my plants? And why are the armadillos tearing up my brand new expensive sod lawn, right? It's because there's lots of underground insects in your lawn, especially if it's well watered. So, you can take measures to reduce the population of insects in your yard through natural means. We really like to use diatomaceous earth. That can go a pretty long way in helping to reduce insect populations without spreading poison out into the ecosystem, right? Okay, so those are kind of my quick tips on dealing with some wildlife issues that you might have. I want to talk a little bit specifically about a couple cases that we see pretty regularly. A big one is cottontail bunnies. We take in hundreds of cottontail rabbits. And the trouble is that mom makes her nest, she just squishes down a little patch of grass. And it's really not a spectacular nest. It's pretty innocuous. And that's on purpose, right? She doesn't want to attract attention to her babies. But mama bunny is going to be out eating grass all day to make rabbit milk, right? Rabbit milk, highly nutritious. You got to eat a lot of grass. You're out eating grass all day long. And then she'll come back to the nest and gorge her babies. They just drink as much as they can until they're super full. And then she's off eating grass again. So it's really common for people to think the nest has been abandoned because they don't understand the natural history of cottontail rabbits. So, and another big one is people hitting them with their weed whackers and lawnmowers. If they don't walk the yard first and, make sure that they're not going to hit anything, this is really common. And most of the time people feel terrible. They rush them to us and we can help them. So in order to help with this, there's a couple things you can do. So if you find baby bunnies, obviously put them back in the nest. Your smell, your scent on those bunnies is not going to repel the mother. That's a wise tale that we were told as children to keep us from messing with the animals. And, it's fine if you want to perpetuate that, but now you know that that's not true, right? So you can put your babies back in that nest, and there's a couple options. If you have a little camera, sure, put the camera, pointing at the nest. If you see mom come back, great. She's probably going to come back at dusk and dawn when we're having dinner and inside, and you're probably not going to catch her nursing her babies in the first place. Or another, some old-fashioned tips. You can use yarn or like lightweight sewing thread and make a pattern, like a hash mark or X shape. And then when mom comes back, she'll disturb that string, and that's a good indication that she's been there. My favorite one is to use flour, just like baking flour, make a ring, and you can see her little footprints and that disturbed ring, and she's been coming back, and we can leave those bunnies alone. Cottontails are singularly difficult to raise and rehab. They are prey species, so anything that moves, anything that's bigger than them is trying to eat them. So they are extremely stressed out the entire time they're with us. And they don't nurse as easily as other animals do. So we often have to tube feed them for weeks on end, which of course they don't like. And, we would rather not have to do that. So as many bunnies we can keep in the wild, the best. We often get in bunnies from cat attacks and from, sometimes your sweet golden retriever will go get a baby bunny out the backyard, and the bunnies might not even be hurt. They might just be slobbery. We can take those guys in and check them out, but oftentimes we want to send those bunnies back home too. People in the past have built like little dog excluders out of like a laundry basket with a hole cut in it. So the Labrador can't get to the nest, but mom can come in and nurse. So there's solutions, out there if we try hard enough. Poisons, I won't spend too much time on this. We really just discourage the use of poison. It always ends up trickling into higher trophic levels, right? Maybe that mouse doesn't get a lethal dose. Here comes the hawk or the owl coming to eat that mouse. And guess what? All he eats is mice. So he's going to eat a lot of poison mice, and it builds up in them. This can cause reproductive harm and obviously kill the adults as well. So, yeah. One thing that I will recommend for y'all is, and they don't pay me for this at all, I just found that it works. It's called Nature's Defense. And this is a product that you don't need a commercial pest control license to purchase. You can buy it online. And we use this at the sanctuary. We have a huge feed cage with pellets for all the monkeys and the bears and all the donkeys. And, the rats really want to get into that feed cage because it's like heaven in there, right? And we found that this Nature's Defense actually works quite well. To me, it kind of smells like garlicky bubble gum. So it's not great right off the bat, but it could be worse. So we found that this works pretty good. There are some pest control companies out there that will use birth control on the mice so that the population collapses, but no mice were injured in that process, which is what we had to end up doing. And, it was a good solution at the end of the day. Yeah. Other things you can do, of course, if you have rodent issues, a lot of times people have bird feeders up and you want to attract all these awesome birds to our backyard so we can add to our bird count, right? But you're also attracting rats and mice. So you may want to do things like make sure your bird feeder is not spilling over onto the ground. They sell lots of varieties of bird feeders, and I'll recommend one here in a moment. Or encourage natural pest control options. Obviously, our hawks and owls do a great job of keeping the squirrel and rodent population in check. So we'll circle back to that here in a minute. So talk a little bit about whistling ducks and other arboreal ducks. So here in San Antonio, we're right in what they call the Central Flyway, right? So we got awesome view of all these migratory birds. One of the species that we see every year are black-bellied whistling ducks. And these guys nest in trees. In an ideal world, they're supposed to pick a nice oak tree by a nice pond in a secluded meadow somewhere, right? Probably a fantasy, right? They're going to end up nesting in the big oak tree in your backyard where your swimming pool is. And this is a really tough situation because the mother and father duck are supposed to lead her babies away to a large water source, right? And it's tough when we're down here in San Antonio in the middle of just this concrete jungle. The trouble is that our first instincts are to scoop up all these little baby ducklings and bring them to a park or bring them to wildlife rescue, right? The trouble with the little whistling ducks is they are probably 2 or 3 times harder to raise than the cottontails. They are just super stressed out. The reality is that mom has lots of little baby ducklings, and not all of them are going to make it to adulthood. This is similar to sea turtles. Mom lays hundreds of eggs, and her strategy is that maybe a few of them make it to adulthood. And this is really tough. We raise quite a few whistling ducks every year. They're just really tough. So my best advice to you is to leave them alone and not scare the parents off. If you can help them out for a little while, leave some water out for them, mom and dad are going to show them what to eat, right? They don't feed the babies. They just follow mom and dad around and they're eating bugs and vegetation and aquatic vegetation and things like that. So if you scare mom and dad off, they will have no hope. So kind of the takeaway from this is if you see whistling ducks with mom and dad, encourage people to just leave them alone, let nature take its course. Mom and dad will hopefully lead them to a water source. But if you find whistling ducklings by themselves, bring them to us because they can't survive on their own. And it is not uncommon for them to get separated from mom and dad. And we'll take them in and we'll raise them. And we'll do all these kinds of elaborate things to keep them alive and comfortable. One of the big things we use is like feather dusters and mirrors. So they feel like they're with mom and that, they have buddies. We always try and group them together so that they have buddies so they feel safe. But it's just a really tough thing to do. So as far as our swimming pools go to, keeping your pools covered when you're not using them can go a really long way. I've taken in pretty much every species stuck in a swimming pool before, bird or squirrels, possums, everything. We've taken them in from swimming pools. And oftentimes it's just that last little lip, right? There's like that 6-inch gap from the surface of the water where they can get out. And sometimes they just can't get over that. So doing simple things like, we're going to do yoga and then, we gave up on it. But we still have the yoga mat. Roll that into the pool and make a perfect little ramp for these animals to get out. It helps with insects in your pool too. And they sell some special products out there. I forget what this is called, but it's just a little floaty with a little heavy weight bag on it that keeps it stuck to the edge of the pool so animals can get out. So that's kind of the basics on that. I have a few more slides for our bird lovers in the room here as well. So if you're having wildlife issues, give us a call and I'll talk you through the scenarios, or some of my hotline colleagues will talk you through. So, talk about feeding squirrels. Kind of the biggest thing is like, we really shouldn't be feeding the squirrels lots of peanuts. We often see birdseed sold with peanuts. Peanuts, of course, are not actually nuts. They're legumes. They have a lot more, a higher fat content in them. And we tend to see the squirrels kind of putting on weight more quickly than they should. So if you're going to feed the squirrels, it's best to use hard nuts, pecans, walnuts, almonds, those kinds of things. This bird feeder is one that I really like. It's called the Squirrel Buster. Of course, no one's paying me for this. It's just my own personal experience. These are good if your squirrels are just raiding your bird feeders and knocking all your bird seed out. They have a little spring in it, so if a little light bird lands on it, they can get in, but as soon as someone heavy is on there, it locks it, called the squirrel buster. So these are pretty good. Ducks and geese, we got lots of these guys here in San Antonio. We probably take in a duck or a goose once a week, tangled in fishing line. It's really, it happens a lot. And a lot of people here in San Antonio love the ducks. When I was a kid, my grandmother took me to feed the ducks at the park too, and it made a big impact on me. The thing with feeding ducks is that you don't want to give them high caloric food, especially when they're babies. This is what happens if they're fed bread or particularly bread is really calorically dense, right? There's a lot of energy in that. And what happens is when their wings are developing, they grow too quickly and they rotate, and causes angel wing. And this poor Canada goose, her destiny was to migrate to Canada every year, and now she won't be able to. She can't fly anymore. And there's no way to fix this as an adult. If we catch it young as a baby, the veterinarian can fix it. So if you have to feed the ducks at the park, go with regular old bird seed. Totally fine to use that. Or you can actually go and buy duck food at a lot of the feed stores around here in San Antonio. You can buy what's called waterfowl maintenance, which is what we feed our ducks. And it's a pelleted food, kind of like dog food. It's designed to not harm them and to be nutritious. So, and you can buy it on Chewies too. So if you're a big duck feeder or someone who is, turn them on to this. It's called waterfowl maintenance. So. Talk a little bit about the deer, right? So we have a lot of issues with the deer in San Antonio. We get tons and tons of calls about them. And I'll kind of touch on a couple of the high points here, right? So the deer actually do really well in San Antonio, not so much because the people feed them, but because humans encourage a lot of vegetation to grow, right? We're constantly watering shrubs and bushes and grass. So there is quite a bit for them to eat, even if we weren't feeding them directly. Obviously, you can go to any HEB and buy a big old bag of deer corn pretty much any time of year, right? Which is unfortunate because corn can cause some pretty serious issues over time. There's a lot of debate about this online or depending on who you talk to. It's in my experience, it is not good for them. The one big thing is that the corn breaks down into sugar, right? So it's you're basically giving them Skittles at the end of the day. They love it. We sent it for them. You buy like apple flavored corn and they're really into it. But it's really just not good for their digestive tract. These animals are ruminants, right? They have this specialized stomach filled with bacteria meant to break down plant matter. And if we load that up with sugar, it can really kind of throw that digestion off. The other big thing is that corn is pretty hard. And if you've ever heard deer eat corn, it's like popping and snapping as they're crunching it. And it can cause their teeth to wear unevenly and cause dental issues down the road as well. And then this image here, we call this lumpy jaw. Definitely not a technical term for it, but it's caused when they have an abscess. And typically this is exacerbated by a heavy corn diet. So if you have to feed the deer, I recommend that you feed them high protein deer pellets. They're a little bit more expensive, but it's kind of like buying good quality dog food. You don't have to use as much. It's going to go further. It's going to be better for them. If you can help it to not feed the deer at all, is really the preference. What happens when we have someone putting out a lot of deer feed is that it's going to support a larger population of deer. And when populations get really dense, we see disease spread rapidly. So, if we're really kind of bulking up that local deer population, it could backfire on us down the road if we get bad disease in the deers, right? There is something called chronic wasting disease. I won't get into that tonight because it's a really heavy duty topic. It's not something that's happened here in San Antonio widespread, but it's something that we're of course worried about, right? So if someone is feeding the deer, you can kind of encourage them, let the deer do their natural thing. Let them eat the browse and the forbs and keep the forests from getting too dense and help with forest fires. They play a critical role on their own, and feeding them is really just not necessary. So, woodpeckers. So not a common call, but I do get some calls, people going crazy because woodpeckers are banging on their house and they can't get any rest, right? And what's actually happening is the woodpeckers, they peck for really two big reasons. One is to find food, but they also use it as a call to be able to call to other woodpeckers. And they might find that perfect little piece of siding that's a little bit loose. When they hit it, it resonates and it sounds great for them, right? So if you're having issues with that, you got to figure out why they're pecking on that particular spot. Go in there, get your little caulk and make it so that it's deadened so that it doesn't sound as good for them. Or encourage them to go elsewhere, right? Doing things like putting out what I call effigies or statues of hawks or owls will often scare off woodpeckers. Obviously, birds have good vision. They're smart. You got to move that owl around. If he stays in the same spot, they're going to catch on, right? So move your owl around or get a couple of them. Hawks and owls, you can buy these kinds of things on Amazon or at Home Depot, and they're pretty ubiquitous. You can find them pretty much everywhere. Reflective streamers actually go a long way. Bird repellent is like a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? All the airports and stadiums, there's all kinds of areas where people don't want birds, right? So there's lots of things out there that you can try, but these are just some that I've found that work well. The reflective streamers, particularly the little pinwheel ones, like when we were little kids, you had the little thing you blow in and it spins. They sell those, but they're like rainbowy foil kind of, and they throw a lot of really kind of reflections off when they spin, and it makes the birds nervous. A lot of our little songbirds don't like to see fast moving things overhead. It makes them think that there's predators in the area. So this is a pretty good, safe repellent for birds as well. Suet feeders and roost boxes, just to, get the birds away from the home so that they're, in, the backyard and not so close to the house are good options too. Barn swallows, we of course love the barn swallows. They perform a huge service eating, just tons and tons of insects, including mosquitoes, right? So we want to keep these guys around. Of course, all of our native birds are protected by the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty, so it's illegal to harm or injure the nest or disturb the nest in any way. But these barn swallows come and they make a mud nest, and a lot of times people don't want these at apartments or at businesses or in people's homes. And the best thing that I can tell you to do is to encourage them to nest elsewhere. If you've already got a barn swallow nest going and you don't want them there, then really my recommendation to you is to get used to it, to learn to love it, right? This happened to me when we moved here to Texas. We have a little 3rd-story apartment and we had barn swallows move in, and there's bird poop all over the back porch. My wife's like, no, we got to do something about this. And so I just moved a potted plant under there and started collecting all that bird guano, and we had the best chili peppers I've ever grown that year. So, you can adapt, you can look at this in a different way. You can also, if you got someone handy, make barn swallow nest purchase. These little special boxes like this, it just gives them, it's kind of like a half-built house. They just got to finish it off and they'll use that next year. They come back every year. If your house did great the first year, then guess what? They're going to come back the year after and the year after. So maybe once they're gone and left for the year, you can take the nest down. That's okay. But you don't want to mess with that nest while they're still using it, right? Take that nest down, give them another spot, at the edge of the house where they can encourage them to nest. Barn swallows are really neat. The aunts and uncles will actually help raise the babies. So they have a really good support network. So it's pretty easy to find baby barn swallows, get them back in the nest, and know that not only mom and dad are feeding them, but aunts and uncles will feed those babies too. So you can definitely re-nest barn swallows. A little bit on cardinals. These guys, the biggest issue with these guys is the males and sometimes the females attacking their own reflection. You've probably seen this happen. I see it a lot in parking lots. A lot of birds like attack the side of car mirrors, but oftentimes it's just like your home, the glass windows in your home. And it's really a pretty easy solution, and that is to block that reflection, right? And it may look ridiculous to have newspaper all over the, guest bedroom window in the house, but it's only temporary. You just need to do it long enough so that, they go off and actually find another bird to, get into it with and not their reflection, right? So a lot of times they're protecting their territory as well. So yeah, so just closing blinds and curtains and, putting up a little bit of duct tape, some newspaper in the window, whatever's clever, right? Or don't clean your windows and let them get dirty, and that helps with the reflection too. So it's an excuse not to clean, right? So, a big one is window strikes. We get a lot of birds that hit windows. This is really common, especially if we have big picture frame windows. I know we have a lot of that kind of architecture down here. This is a tough one. If you want to enjoy your windows, I recommend this product. It's called Window Alert. And you go online and they're like, it's like $5 for a little pack of little decals. And you can stick them on the window, and to the human eye, they're almost see-through. They're just like translucent. So you can enjoy the view out of your window. But when the sun hits them, they fluoresce in ultraviolet, and birds can see in ultraviolet light. So they see that there's a barrier there and we can still use the window. So they call it Window Alert. It's a good product. I'm sure there's other varieties of that. Again, no one's paying me for this. I just think these are, some pretty good things you might check out. A couple tips on birds hitting windows. So if a bird hits a window, sometimes they're okay. If you hit a window going 30 miles an hour, you're probably going to need a minute, even if you're not badly damaged, right? So I'm always asking for three things. If that bird can hold themselves upright and not keep flopping over, then we're going to give that bird some time. If the bird's eyes are going like that, like he's dizzy, like he just got off like a merry-go-round, then we want to take that little guy in, right? If he can't hold himself upright, we want to take him in. And then the other big one is if you've got a droopy wing. Birds should be able to tuck their wings nice and tight and neat back against their body. If you got a wing droop, that's a dead giveaway that we might have a broken bone. The spinning and flipping over are pretty clear signs of head or spinal cord trauma, all things that WR will do. We are the only people in town that if a pigeon hits your car window, we're going to take that pigeon in and we're going to give him pain meds. We're going to give him fluids. He'll get x-rays. He'll get, his wings pinned back together. The veterinarian's going to work on that bird for weeks. And we're the only people that are going to do that. So if this ever happens and you're in doubt, bring those little guys to us. Same thing with every animal that we take in. We'll take in big great horned owls and fix them up. But if someone brings us like a little toad, we'll take him into, and the doctor will make a splint out of a paper clip or a toothpick or whatever's necessary. We just don't discriminate. That goes to the core of who we are. And some people might think that's ridiculous, but it's what we do. So just a couple of quick statistics. This little data is a little bit old, but yeah, we take in a ton of birds. Doves make up a huge portion of the animals that we take in. So yeah. So talk briefly about how y'all can get involved. Obviously, you can become donors to the organization. You can put us in your will. You can donate monthly, or you can donate stuff too. We'll take a lot of stuff that you're probably throwing away. Things like bed sheets, old dog beds. We'll even take what's solid gold to us are pillowcases and peanut butter jar lids. If you're throwing that stuff out, consider dropping it off down on Babcock, because we use those little plastic lids to feed a lot of animals. And then the pillowcases are like the #1 bedding that we use. And you always buy bed sheets and you end up with extra pillowcases. I know you all have extra pillowcases in the house, so come get rid of them. Or maybe you got an old bath mat that's kind of seen as cool. We'll take that old one and you can get a new one, right? So you can give us your stuff and we'll put it to good use. Yeah, volunteering is another big way. You don't have a lot of money, you want to come help us out. Volunteers do a bunch of things for us, everything from feeding the baby deer, helping me bottle feed the deer is a huge undertaking. We, in the height of the summer, will mix up like 15 to 20 gallons of formula at a time. We'll have like electric drill with a concrete attachment, mixing formula up because we just have to make so much. All that has to be put into bottles and heated up to body temperature, taken down to the fawn yard, and we'll be feeding a bunch of fawns all at once. It's a blast, but it's a lot of work and we can definitely use help with that. Raising baby birds is a big one. It's extremely labor intensive. You got to be there feeding that little baby every 10, 20, 30 minutes, depending on how big they are. If you're someone that has a lot of patience, you can come sit down. You don't have to stand, you come sit down and I'll teach you how to bottle feed little baby squirrels for hours on end. There's plenty of that to go around for people that want to work with the animals. The other things that behind the scenes, food transport for us, H-E-B and Walmart, a couple food banks, Costco, Imperfect Foods. These big companies donate to us daily, and you can go there if you got a truck or an SUV, pick up the food and bring it out to the sanctuary. And it's a huge help. Produce is very expensive. It's just gotten more expensive in recent years. And we have to have it. If we don't get it donated, then we have to buy it. So, every little box that comes from H-E-B that's, full of avocados and bananas, it's really a huge help for us. Volunteers also transport wildlife. Every day, the facility in San Antonio builds up with animals, builds up. And then in the morning, a volunteer comes and they pick those animals up. We load your car full of them. We'll use cardboard boxes. We'll send 60 animals up in the back of a Subaru if we have to. It's just how it goes. And yeah, you can just Uber drive for animals. You're just transporting animals for us back and forth from the city out to the country, and to be able to release animals too. This is a really cool thing. It's very labor intensive to take, 1 or 2 blue jays and drive them back to Floresville where they came from, right? volunteers can sign up to release animals as they're ready to be released as well, which, you get to explore Texas, see places you'd have no business going. And that's one of the best experiences is releasing animals after they've been rehabbed. On the other side is rescuing animals. So I host classes on the weekends on how to actually rescue animals. So our hotline gets all manner of phone calls, right? And sometimes most of the time people will bring the animal to us. Like, if you find a baby possum, you'd probably be willing to put him in a shoebox and drive him to us, right? Not everyone is willing to do that or is able to do that. And sometimes the rescues are really simple. Like, someone calls me and they work at AutoZone and they found a baby possum in the back storage area. Well, my boss won't let me leave, Okay, well, hang tight, get that possum in a little box, keep him warm and dark and quiet, and we're going to find a rescue volunteer. And it may just be something as simple as me calling you up and saying, hey, we go cruise down to this AutoZone and get this little possum and bring him to us, right? That's an easy rescue. We call that a level 1 rescue. All the way up to, there's 2 white-tailed deer bucks tangled together in a soccer net. And I have volunteers that will help with those kinds of situations too, and everything in between. And people kind of go to their comfort level. If you're okay picking up little babies and bringing them to us, but you're not into snakes, it's fine. I won't call you on snake calls. Or maybe you got a new car, don't want to put skunks in there, it's fine. I got people with pickup trucks that'll help me with that kind of thing. So there's lots of things that the volunteers do for me at the sanctuary as well, helping me prepare food for, we have about 200 monkeys that live there. There's a lot of food that has to get chopped up. So just coming and chopping for hours on end, helping me weed whack and mow and scrub ponds and muck out stalls. There's all that kind of stuff to be done as well. Most of this is done at our sanctuary in Kendalia, which is a little drive. It's about an hour north of here. But I think that most of the volunteers find that it's totally worth the drive to be out there. It's really peaceful, really quiet, get out of the city, be around wildlife and help us with our mission. So, yeah. That's kind of all I got for y'all. I'll definitely take a few questions if anyone has any.
I have a question.
Yes.
That I'd like to ask because myself and my son were cats. And there's a lot of girl cats in my neighborhood, and they're so cute. And you it's mean to them, but they can't. If they're in my yard and they're on our lawn stuff, it's like, then my son, I don't want something to happen. So that's what we do.
So a classic problem is I found a fledgling bird and I'm worried about them being on the ground and in the neighborhood.
Right.
And do you want to talk to the microphone?
I don't know the animals.
Okay. So yeah, some people are worried about that birds, obviously, radio furniture. There's a couple of techniques that you might try. So we're talking about cats and feral cats being in the yard and potentially being endangered birds and people that are allergic to them. You might try, my last ditch effort is a motion sensor sprinkler. So they're a little bit more expensive. They're about 60 or 80 bucks on Amazon or Home Depot or something like that. And obviously you can set them for a timer and a zone so you can kind of discourage them. Cats, of course, have a great aversion to water. So, you can use that to your advantage. The other thing you might try is cayenne pepper. Obviously, you want to be careful with that with your family. And if you have pets at home, you want to be strategic where you put that. So if you think the cats are coming from a certain area, maybe you make a barrier there with cayenne pepper, maybe set up that motion sensor sprinkler there. Do y'all have dogs too?
No, I have asthma, so
Yeah.
I was wondering if the walls with the ammonia smell, if that would that.
So you could try. Cats are pretty territorial and they may just spray on top of that ammonia as well. So it just depends on your neighborhood cats. Discouraging them from that area, you can do, I think motion sensor devices might be a good way to go. Try some motion lights and some motion sensor sprinklers. I've found that's the only thing that will keep the deer out of my tiny little flower bed is that motion sensor sprinkler. So something to think about. Yes.
I found something useful for cats that are wanting to use your flower bed as their litter box. I went to a place that sells oysters and I bought oyster shells and I just put a whole bunch of oyster shells and they really don't like it. No, I clean them out.
Yeah.
It's just, they're in the way, they get into, they can't dig. and
Oh.
They just, they have to walk around them.
Just makes them uncomfortable.
That's just like my plants house too.
What did you say?
Oyster shells.
Well, also the
Oh, lava rocks.
That's what I did in the plants at home to the house. I didn't think about using that.
Or any stones. Any stones.
Or any dog is worth his weight, right? Yes.
That was actually one of the things I was gonna ask you, that you didn't really mention as insurance. Dogs, or you only really tangentially mentioned one of the things a lot of people rely on significantly, which is. The plants, because you only mentioned like peppermint oil or something as a commercial product, not.
Right, yeah.
Planting them around the perimeter and the town.
Yeah, peppermint
Or like,
oil is a
you
good
know,
one.
citrus to keep cats out of there.
Excellent.
They
Yeah.
can't stand it.
They can stand what?
Citrus,
Oh.
And rodents can't stand it.
yeah, peppermint oil is a
They're
good one.
country
Yeah.
with rats and mice.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things, you know, if you're trying to maneuver, then there's some plants that one thing may be repelled by, but another day just attracted to, you know?
Very good. Well, thank y'all all so much for having me here. Hopefully I've inspired you to, yes, you have one other question? Go ahead.
That stuff that you were talking about, that was that's not like the thing for me, that kind of, no, I can't, what?
The diatomaceous earth.
No, the stuff that that is called